Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. We're going to unpack exactly how the sudden death of the world's most famous pop star, literally just weeks before a massive comeback, spiraled into a groundbreaking criminal trial. On June 25, 2009, the world pretty much just stopped. The king of pop was gone. But, as that initial shock faded, the details that started leaking out painted a picture that was far more disturbing than just some sudden illness. We're going to walk through the evidence, the medical decisions, and the intense courtroom battles that defined one of the most controversial medical negligence cases in modern history.
So the central question we're tackling today is simple, but honestly, it's completely baffling. How did a man with virtually unlimited resources, who was under the direct, constant care of a private physician, die in his own bed? To really understand this tragedy, we have to look way past those sensational headlines and examine the truly bizarre circumstances that transformed a luxury bedroom into a lethal environment. This is really a story about the limits of medicine, the crushing pressures of fame, and the catastrophic failure of standard protocols.
Part 1. The June 25th Emergency.
So picture this. Inside a rented mansion in the Holmby Hills neighborhood of LA, a crisis is unfolding with terrifying speed. What was supposed to be this quiet place of rest and preparation suddenly became the epicenter of a medical emergency that was rapidly spinning out of control. In the morning, paramedics arrive, and they find Jackson already in full cardiac arrest. And despite these frantic, chaotic attempts to revive him, literally doing continuous CPR in the back of the ambulance the entire way to the hospital, it just wasn't enough. The escalation was incredibly fast. By early afternoon, doctors at UCLA Medical Center had to make the devastating call. Michael Jackson was pronounced dead. He was just 50 years old.
Part 2. The Obsession with Rest. Now, to figure out the root cause of that morning's events, we've got to step back a bit. Jackson was intensely rehearsing for his This Is It concert series in London. These shows were supposed to be monumental, right? A final career chapter generating hundreds of millions of dollars. But behind the scenes, the pressure was absolutely crushing him. He was suffering from debilitating, chronic insomnia, sometimes unable to sleep for days on end. The pursuit of rest quickly turned into this incredibly dangerous obsession. Enter Dr. Conrad Murray. This guy, a licensed cardiologist, was being paid an astonishing $150,000 a month. And he wasn't just dropping by for a quick checkup. He was effectively hired to basically live in Jackson's orbit, on call around the clock. His one main mandate? Guarantee that the pop star could sleep.
And this brings us to the absolute crux of the whole case, Propofol. Look, this isn't your average over-the-counter sleeping pill. This is a highly potent, surgical-grade anesthetic. It's the kind of stuff they use in hospital operating rooms to put you in an artificial coma for major surgery. Yet Dr. Murray later admitted to police that he was actually using this intense, highly regulated drug as an at-home sleep aid for Jackson.
Part 3. A dangerous nightly routine.
The fatal timeline really kicks off in the early hours of June 25th. Jackson was, once again, desperately struggling to sleep. Murray first tried a bunch of standard sedatives throughout the night, but nothing was doing the trick. So as morning approaches, the doctor makes a terrifyingly risky medical decision. He administers Propofol through an IV line. The contrast between how this drug should be used and how it was actually used that night is just staggering. Normally, administering Propofol means you have continuous oxygen, advanced cardiac monitors, and emergency staff ready to jump in at a second's notice. But in that Holmby Hills bedroom, nothing. No continuous oxygen supply, no advanced monitors, no backup personnel. Literally none of the rigid hospital safety measures required for this drug were there.
And the tension really hits a breaking point when you look at the delay that happened next. After the propofol goes in, Jackson stops breathing. Murray later claimed he had just stepped away briefly and came back to find him unresponsive. But instead of immediately calling 911, Murray tried to do CPR himself. There was an astonishing 82-minute gap before emergency services were actually contacted. Think about that. Over an hour and 20 minutes of life-saving time just lost. And even then, it was a member of Jackson's staff who had to make the call. During this massive delay, Murray was apparently making phone calls and sending emails. And when the paramedics finally got there, Murray didn't even mention that he'd given Jackson propofol.
Well, the coroner's investigation was swift, and it was undeniable. The official cause of death? Acute propofol intoxication, made even worse by other sedatives like benzodiazepines in his system. Because of this, the coroner officially ruled the death a homicide. When investigators combed through the bedroom, they found prescriptions for nearly 20 different powerful medications. They also discovered Murray had given Jackson a second drug, flumizanil, to try and reverse the propofol, which was a desperate move that experts later testified probably made Jackson's condition even worse. So suddenly, the focus of the entire world was squarely on Dr. Murray.
Part 4. The Trial of Conrad Murray.
Fast forward to September 2011. Dr. Conrad Murray is facing an involuntary manslaughter charge in this globally watched absolute spectacle of a trial. It completely blurred the lines between private medical care and criminal liability. The courtroom turned into a battleground between two very different narratives. The prosecution argued it was a total abandonment of medical standards. They painted a picture of gross negligence, highlighting the absolute absurdity of using a dangerous surgical anesthetic in a bedroom, failing to monitor the patient, and delaying a 911 call to send emails. But the defense? They pushed back hard. They argued Jackson had a severe dependency, that he was constantly pressuring his doctor for stronger drugs, and they even suggested Jackson actually self-administered the fatal dose while Murray had momentarily stepped out of the room.
Part 5. Verdict and lasting impact.
So the jury has to weigh all of this, right? And it took them less than 2 days to come back with a verdict. In November 2011, they found Conrad Murray guilty of involuntary manslaughter. This was huge. It's incredibly rare in the legal system to see a practicing doctor criminally convicted for actions directly tied to patient care. And the trial judge? He did not hold back. During sentencing, he specifically cited Murray's gross negligence and the sheer vulnerability of his patient. Dr. Murray was handed 4 years in prison, which was the absolute maximum penalty allowed under the law at the time.
But you know, the story doesn't really end with the 4-year sentence. Because of California's prison crowding policies, Murray actually only served about 2 years before he was released in 2013. His U.S. medical licenses were suspended in several states, but interestingly enough, he ended up returning to his native Trinidad and Tobago and actually opened a new medical clinic down there. But maybe the biggest, most enduring legacy of this whole explainer is the massive debate it ignited in the medical world about something called VIP syndrome. That's this incredibly dangerous phenomenon where a doctor gets blinded by the awe of fame or the intense pressure of a wealthy client, and they basically just abandon basic medical standards to appease them.
Which brings us right to the core lesson here. I want to leave you with a really provocative question to think about. When treating influential, demanding people, at what point does accommodating a patient cross the line into deadly medical negligence? This tragic case is just a potent reminder of exactly why rigid standards of care exist in medicine in the first place. They are there to protect all of us. Because regardless of your wealth, your status, or how famous you might be, the rules of medicine absolutely cannot be bent without risking it all.